Hello from Midori House in London on December the 18th, 2012. This is The Globalist on Monocle 24 with me, Guy Delaunay, and Romas Viasulas. Coming up, California's Democratic Party has reached so-called supermajority. That, in theory, gives it the kind of power no party has had for the past 80 years. So what will this mean in policy terms? It's just coming up to 6:10 at Studio One here at Midori House in London, and you're listening to The Globalist on Monocle 24.
Vanuit Londen. Dit is Monocle 24. 런던으로부터 모노클 24입니다.
Op London, to är Monocle 24.
Fra London, dette er Monocle 24.
From London, desde Londres.
Hollanda.
런던으로부터
Hong Kong.
Zurich.
London.
This is Monocle 24.
You're listening to The Globalist live from Studio One in Midori House with me, Guy Delaunay, and Romas Viasulas.
As the U.S. contends with political gridlock across the Federation, in California, the Democratic Party has the upper hand. Given recent election success, Democrats in California now control two-thirds of both the Senate and the Assembly.
This political advantage also looks like it's set to last. Even their Republican opponents agree that demographics are likely to grant Democrats a supermajority until at least the end of the decade. So what's this going to mean in policy terms? We're joined now to explain all of this by Dan Mitchell, Professor of Public Policy Emeritus at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. Good morning, Professor Mitchell.
Good morning.
Now, here's a question. I mean, this supermajority California already has, as I've learning from my American colleagues as if I didn't know already, this reputation as being very progressive, very leftward-leaning. Is this supermajority likely to make it even more so?
Well, the supermajority was achieved in part because California actually has a kind of nonpartisan tradition. That is, both political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, have been in decline, and the most rapidly rising party is independents, that is, people who are not affiliated with either party. But the Democrats have more luck at appealing to those independents, and in the last election in particular, they were able to get this supermajority in both houses of the legislature. So they now could, for example, in theory, impose new taxes. They could put constitutional amendments on the state ballot. There are a variety of things that require a two-thirds vote that they could do.
Professor Mitchell, tell us a little bit more about these independents. Are we talking about variants on the theme of the Tea Party?
Oh, no. These are people who sort of fall in between. They are not likely to call themselves conservative, and they don't call themselves liberal. They sort of stand somewhere between the two parties. And this is a long tradition, actually, in California, a kind of disdain for political parties, for politicians. That's why we have so many ballot measures that the people decide things rather than leaving it to the legislature and the governor. So it's a long tradition in California, but of late the Democrats have been more successful in appealing to those middle-of-the-road independents than the Republicans have.
I was going to say there is this tradition of passing measures by ballot, almost direct rule by the people in California. And this isn't entirely good news, is it? Because you get people voting through legislation which costs the state money. These measures don't ever seem to get repealed. And the state also seems to exist in a perpetual state of budget crisis.
Well, one thing that happened in the last election was that the governor himself put a tax measure on the state ballot as an initiative, and it passed. So, although, yes, we've had this ongoing budget crisis that goes back quite a few years, there is some relief in store for the next couple of years, at least, because of the new revenue that's going to be coming in.
But I guess in a climate where people are used to, voting themselves on these budget measures, does the supermajority perhaps then mean less than outsiders like us think that it actually means?
Well, it's very unlikely that our governor, Jerry Brown, would be comfortable with the legislature, in fact, voting for new taxes or letting spending get way out of control. Some people have projected that because of the two-thirds majority that the Democrats have. But it's unlikely that the governor would want anything like that to happen. And he does have the ability to veto bills that he doesn't like, including budget measures, and probably would do so. Now, in theory, a two-thirds vote could override that veto, but I think Democrats would think twice about pushing aside the wishes of the governor.
So would it be fair to say that perhaps there's an argument that this could mean more than it appears on the surface? The old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Is there a risk that the Democrats overreach in their ambitions politically?
Well, I think that's what the governor wants to check. We have this oddity. The current governor is both the oldest and the youngest governor that California has had. He was governor in the mid-1970s and into the early 80s, and then there was kind of a hiatus in his career. Now he's come back. But in both iterations, he's always posed as somebody who wants to be frugal, who doesn't want to have excess spending and so on. So I think his role is going to be keeping his party in check. Now, of course, there are a lot of things that the legislature can vote on that don't directly involve either taxes or spending. For example, there's talk about raising the state minimum wage. State is very much involved in environmental issues, greenhouse gas emissions and things like that. So there are a lot of issues that the Democrats could take up that don't involve either taxes or spending.
You've talked about the bipartisan tradition that you have in California. You know, this is something which politicians at a national level have talked about trying to get back to, and it's manifestly failed, all these efforts of people to play nice at a national level in bipartisan way. Why are the legislators of California different?
Well, we're going to see whether they're going to be different, but one thing that the voters recently enacted was a so-called nonpartisan primary, or top two primary. So that means if you run for the state legislature, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, or you belong to some minor third party, everybody is in the pool at once in the primary. And that means that even in districts that are heavily Republican or heavily Democratic, the candidates are going to compete to try to get as many votes as they can, and that means they have to pay some attention to the complete spectrum of votes in those districts. So some of the Democrats that were added to the Democratic majority and brought that two-thirds margin at the last election, they were elected in districts that could go Republican, could go Democrat. It could be characterized as swing districts, and they have to pay a lot of attention to everybody in those districts. So we're going to have a number of key people in the legislature who have this middle of the road, try to keep both sides happy as part of their constituency.
Professor Mitchell, lastly and briefly, talk to us a little bit about demographics. The Democrats seem to be enshrined in this supermajority for the foreseeable future, thanks to California's demographics.
Yes, well, California, as you know, is a very diverse state, so we look like what the U.S. might look like 20 or 30 years from now. We are sometimes called a majority-minority state because there's no single group that has 50% plus one of the population. So that means you have to, as a member of the legislature or running for any office, you have to appeal to a broad range of demographic groups, with the Latino population being the most rapidly rising group among the California demographic. So you have to appeal to a large number of people with very different backgrounds and interests, and the Democrats have been more successful at doing that of late than the Republicans have.
Professor Mitchell, thank you very much for dialing in. That was Dan Mitchell, Professor of Public Policy Emeritus at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs.